Jason Chandler sat on the couch, staring at his phone. Not long ago, he received a disturbing call from Karen, his wife of nearly 10 years. Earlier that day, she mentioned that she and her companion had just boarded a flight to Honolulu. He knew they planned to spend the week there, even though she had claimed something different earlier. It was just the latest in a long line of lies and bad decisions on her part. He wondered how he could have been so foolish and blind for nearly 10 years. He had given everything to build a life with Karen, but now it felt like it was all gone. He took another sip of coffee and leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes as memories of the last decade washed over him. He met Karen 13 years ago in college while they were both pursuing business degrees and participating in the same study group. Their friendship evolved into a romance, leading them to fall in love and marry shortly after graduation. Jason went to work for his father, who owned a chain of successful tire stores across the state. He had always worked for his dad, spending summers in one of the many stores. He started in the shop, handling tires and brakes, and later moved to delivering parts. This gave him a deep understanding of the business. After college, his father urged him to join the corporate headquarters accounting department. Jason's competence earned him the head position in the department, reporting directly to Mike Allen, the CFO who was soon to retire. Jason anticipated stepping into this role, fulfilling his father's dream of passing the company on to him. Meanwhile, Karen pursued a career as a realtor. After they married, she went back to school to earn her real estate license and became quite successful, even during tough market conditions. They managed to build a good life together, or so Jason thought. They bought a nice house in the suburbs, drove relatively new cars, and appeared to have a solid marriage. However, the absence of children was a source of disappointment for Jason, though Karen seemed less affected by it. She mentioned having issues with her tubes early in their marriage and underwent a procedure that was supposed to prevent pregnancy. When Jason suggested adoption, she dismissed the idea. Over time, he reluctantly accepted that they would never have children. But things began to change over the past year, sowing doubts in Jason's mind. Karen started spending more time with her friends, often staying out late. What began as occasional happy hours became frequent outings, with Karen sometimes returning home around midnight or later. Jason expressed his concerns, but Karen dismissed them, claiming she needed to unwind from work. One night, she came home looking disheveled, with clothes smelling of smoke. When Jason asked what she was doing until midnight, Karen snapped, "Look, Jace, it's none of your concern. I'm an adult and don't need you telling me what to do." Seeing the hurt on his face, she softened, apologized, and attributed her behavior to work stress. Jason tried to be understanding, but her dismissive attitude lingered in his mind. Their intimacy dwindled over the following months. What used to be 3 or 4 times a week decreased to twice, and eventually to once every 2 weeks, if Jason was lucky. Karen also seemed uninterested in his work or hobbies, a stark contrast to her earlier attentiveness. The breaking point came when Jason caught Karen in a blatant lie. He had stopped by her office to surprise her with lunch, only to be told she was out showing properties. That evening, Karen claimed to have been at the office all day, catching up on paperwork. Stunned by her deceit, Jason chose not to press her, fearing an explosive argument. But doubts about their relationship continued to grow, leaving Jason questioning how many other lies she had told him over the years. Later that night, lying in bed, Jason asked Karen if she still loved him. She reassured him, albeit half-heartedly, and they shared a rare moment of intimacy. But the same patterns soon reemerged. Jason's suspicions were further fueled when his longtime friend, Ron Green, called unexpectedly. Ron wanted to meet Jason for a beer, insisting that it was urgent. Jason agreed, and they met at a bar later that evening. After a few drinks, Ron revealed he had seen Karen that day, holding hands and kissing another man. Initially disbelieving, Jason was devastated when Ron showed him a photo. It was undeniably Karen. Jason, though shaken, asked Ron for the contact details of a private investigator. When Jason got home that night, he found Karen in the kitchen, an unusual occurrence. She greeted him warmly, but Jason's mind was elsewhere. In the following days, Jason met with the investigator, who agreed to follow Karen during her upcoming trip to Las Vegas. Jason planted a voice-activated recorder under her car seat before she left. The recordings, retrieved later, confirmed Jason's worst fears. The investigator also managed to obtain video evidence of Karen and her lover together in Las Vegas. Armed with this evidence, Jason felt a sense of betrayal, but also a steely resolve to confront the truth head-on. Karen's departure to Honolulu seemed to be the final step in her deception. Jason was ready for divorce, no longer able to trust her. As Jason and the investigator delved deeper, they uncovered more secrets. Karen's hidden bank accounts, purchases of expensive gifts, and even a condo she bought without Jason's knowledge. Her hidden pregnancy and termination records were the most painful revelations, leaving Jason in disbelief about how much of their marriage had been based on lies. The day after Karen left, Jason received a call from her mid-flight. The call was brief, filled with background noise and panic. "I'm sorry. Forgive me," she cried before the call abruptly ended. Shortly after, news broke that Karen's plane had crashed into the Pacific Ocean. Jason's emotions were a mix of anger, relief, and sadness. He mourned the loss of his marriage more than Karen herself, unable to forgive her betrayal even in death. Christy, Greg's wife, experienced similar feelings. As the weeks passed, Jason and Christy found solace in each other, navigating the aftermath of the crash and the unexpected freedom that came with it. In the months that followed, Jason and Christy grew close, sharing a bond forged through mutual pain and betrayal. They cleared out their spouse's belongings, sold the condo, and settled insurance claims, amassing a small fortune in the process. Jason proposed to Christy, and she accepted, announcing she was pregnant. The irony wasn't lost on either of them, but they chose to focus on the future rather than the past. As they planned their lives together, Jason vowed never to repeat the mistakes of his past, grateful for a second chance at happiness. Jason Chandler sat on the couch looking at his phone. Not long ago, he received a disturbing call from Karen, his wife of nearly 10 years. Earlier that day, she told him she and her companion had just boarded a flight to Honolulu. He knew they planned to spend the week there, even though she had told him something different. It was just the latest in a long line of lies and bad decisions on her part. He wondered how he could have been so foolish and blind for nearly 10 years. He had given everything to build a life with Karen, but that was all gone now. He took another sip of his coffee and sat back in his chair, closing his eyes as he reflected on the last decade. He met Karen in college 13 years ago, while they were both working towards a business degree and part of the same study group. This eventually led to them dating, and they fell in love, marrying after graduation. He went to work for his father, who owned a chain of successful tire stores across the state. Jason had always worked for his dad, spending his summers in one of the many stores his father owned. Sometimes he worked in the shop, handling tires and brakes. Other times, he was a runner, delivering tires and parts to local shops. As a result, he learned a lot about the business. After college, his father encouraged him to work at the corporate headquarters in the accounting department. Over the years, Jason proved himself capable of handling whatever needed to be done, eventually becoming the head of the department and working directly for Mike Allen, the CFO, who was set to retire in a couple of years. Jason knew it was his father's dream to pass the company to him when he retired, and he anticipated being promoted to take over Mike's position. Meanwhile, Karen had taken a job as a realtor. After they married, she went to school to get her real estate license and quickly became very good at her job, earning a decent income even during tougher market times. They had a good life, or so he thought. They scrimped and saved to buy a nice house in the suburbs, each driving fairly new cars, and to all outside appearances, they had a secure marriage. They didn't have any children, which bothered him more than it did her. He thought it was a blessing in disguise. Early on, Karen mentioned issues with her tubes, which led to her decision to undergo a procedure. He had consoled her and suggested looking into adoption, but she dismissed the idea. Eventually, he accepted that they would never have children. However, several things happened over the last year that made him suspect something was amiss, something that would forever change his relationship with Karen. For starters, Karen began spending more time with her friends than ever before. He never begrudged her some time out, understanding the stress of her job, but the occasional happy hour became a 2 or 3 night a week event. Depending on the day, she might not come home until midnight or later. Jason wasn't happy about it and expressed his concerns, but she brushed him off, claiming she needed to unwind from work. One night, when she came home, her hair disheveled and her clothes carrying the scent of smoke, he asked, "So what are you doing until midnight?" "Oh, we just had a few drinks. Sometimes we might dance if the mood strikes us." "Look, Jace, it's none of your concern. I'm an adult and don't need you telling me what to do. So lay off, okay?" Jason stared at her, shocked. She had never spoken to him like that before. Seeing the look on his face, she softened. "I'm sorry, Jace. I didn't mean to snap at you. It's just that we're under a lot of pressure with the market the way it is. You've worked through tough times before, and it didn't bother you. What's different about this time? You have no idea how hard it is. The competition is getting tougher, and the higher-ups are putting more pressure on us to sell properties." "I understand that, dear," he replied, "but you don't need to take it out on me. I'm on your side, remember." She smiled and wrapped her arms around him. "You're right, dear. Please accept my apology." "All right, I accept, but please take a shower or something. No offense, but you smell like smoke." "Sorry, there were a lot of people smoking at the club. I'll go take a shower." He lay down and was asleep by the time she made it to bed. The next few months saw other changes as well. The frequency of their intimacy dropped dramatically. Previously, they used to be close 3 or 4 times a week, but that decreased to twice a week and eventually fell off to about once every 2 weeks, if he was lucky. Even worse, her attitude toward him seemed to change. She used to ask about his work and show interest in his hobbies, but now it seemed she could care less about what he had to say. Then there was the day he caught her in a blatant lie. One day, he decided to drop by her office to take her out to lunch, but when he arrived, he was told she was out showing some property. That night, after Karen returned home from whatever it was she had been doing, he asked about her day. "I was in the office all day today," she said. "I had a lot of paperwork to catch up on, so I just grabbed a sandwich from the vending machine." Jason was shocked. She just lied to him with a straight face. As far as he knew, this was the first time she had done that. He thought about pressing her on it, but chose not to. In her frame of mind, she would probably blow a gasket, and he was simply too tired to deal with that. He began to wonder, though, how many other times she had lied to him. Later that night, as they lay in bed, he rolled over and looked at her. She noticed the concern on his face. "What's wrong, Jace?" she asked. "I'm concerned," he said, "about us. I feel like we're drifting apart. Do you still love me?" "Of course I do, honey," she said, putting an arm around him. "You know that, don't you?" "Honestly, I don't know. I can't remember the last time you told me. And it's been a while since we've been close. It seems like you're gone more than you're home. I'm sorry. It's just the pressure from work. I do love you. Please believe me. Can you start showing me a little more?" he asked. "Of course, baby," she said, kissing him gently. They connected that night, and Jason felt a bit better, but he still had concerns. Things went back to normal for a month or so, but the same pattern began to emerge again. What the hell is going on? He asked himself for the umpteenth time. It started to become clear to him what was happening the day his longtime friend Ron Green called, asking if he could meet. "Sure, I can meet you for a beer. What's going on?" I really can't say over the phone, Jace, but it's important. Okay, I'll meet you there at 5:30 if that works. They ended the call, and Jason met Ron at the bar that evening. He wasn't too worried about being late, as Karen was almost always gone until 6 o'clock or 7 p.m. Sometimes later. Okay, bud, Jason said as they sipped their beers. Spill it. What's going on? Jace, I saw your wife today while I was out running errands. Yeah, she sells real estate. Probably out showing some property, I'm sure. But I never knew selling real estate involved handholding. What? Come on. You're pulling my leg. I wish I was, buddy. I was going down Riverside Drive, and I saw your wife coming out of a house with a man. They were holding hands, and then they kissed. I'm not talking about just a peck either. He had his hands around her waist. That can't be. Are you sure you're talking about my Karen? Ron pulled out his cell phone and showed Jason a picture. Sure enough, it was Karen with a man, and they seemed quite close. Jason looked at the picture quietly as he handed the phone back. Can you email me that picture? Sure, Ron said, tapping on his phone. So what are you going to do? Jason shook his head. I don't know, buddy. Things have been off for a while now, but I never thought she'd do something like this. A friend of mine is a private investigator. If you want, I can put you in touch with him. Do that. I need to know what's going on. They said their goodbyes and headed out the door. Karen was in the kitchen when he got home. This was something new, he thought to himself. You're home early, he said, giving her a kiss. I'm not complaining, by the way. She smiled and kissed him back. Where were you? She asked. I was down having a beer with Ron. I wasn't expecting you home so early. So I figured, what the heck? Everything okay with your friend? She asked. Not really. He just found out that the wife of a friend of his is being unfaithful. Oh yeah. He saw her with some guy earlier today. Jason thought he saw her flinch just a bit. Well, maybe he's reading too much into it. I don't know. I'm just glad I don't have that problem. He thought she seemed to flinch slightly at that remark. It would kill me if you ever did anything like that to me, he said. I'd never do anything like that to you, she said, wrapping her arms around him. I love you too much. I'm glad to hear you say that, he told her, kissing her cheek. So, why are you home so early? Well, our annual company convention is coming up this weekend, so I thought I'd start packing. I wanted to spend the next night or two with you since we'll be apart for a few days, she said. It's in Las Vegas this year. Where at? He asked. Oh, over at the convention center. We're all staying at the Westgate Resort. I hear it's a 4-star hotel. So when are you leaving? He asked. Friday afternoon, right after lunch, she said. That was the day after tomorrow. You getting another award this year? He asked, knowing she always received accolades for being the top seller in the region. Probably, she said. They shared another kiss. Well then, why don't I take you upstairs and congratulate you on another successful year? She smiled and took him by the hand. I thought you'd never ask, she said. They spent the evening together, but Jason had other things on his mind. Would she cheat on him over the weekend? He wondered. I have some vacation time coming up. Why don't I take a few days and come with you? Maybe we can spend the week in Vegas and unwind a bit. Our 10th anniversary is coming up next week, you know. That sounds like fun. But I'll be so busy with seminars and meetings. I don't think we'd hardly ever see each other. Besides, they're expecting me to get right back to work after the convention. Listen, why don't we celebrate our anniversary when I get back? I'll make it up to you, I promise. Okay, I'm going to hold you to that. The next day, he contacted Ron and got the name and number of the private investigator. He arranged a meeting for that day and drove over before lunch. Good morning, Mr. Chandler, the middle-aged man said as Jason entered his cluttered office. Good to meet you. Ron said you might be calling. Please call me Jerry. What can I do for you? Jason explained the situation and told him about Karen's upcoming trip to Las Vegas. Vegas, huh? You think she intends to hook up with someone at the convention? I don't know. It's possible. Well, I have contacts out there who owe me a favor or two. Tell you what, we'll put eyes on her there. And if you want, we can sneak in a camera and a microphone. If you get me her room number, it'll cost extra. I figured that, but I need to know the truth. Jerry pulled out a digital audio recorder and handed it to him. This is really simple to use. It's voice activated, so all you have to do is slip it under her car seat and turn it on. You can retrieve it later after she's left. I'm assuming she'll be leaving her car at the airport. She usually does, Jason said. Good. Don't worry. We've got it all covered. If she is messing around, we'll find out. By the way, here's my private number. In case you hear anything, call me anytime. Thanks, Jason said, writing a check from his personal account instead of the joint account. Both he and Karen had their own personal accounts separate from the joint checking account used to pay the bills. They had agreed on this years ago, promising to deposit no more than 10% of their net earnings. Until now, Jason had used his account for clothes, incidentals, and presents for Karen. He had been saving for a cruise, but was now using it for something else. That night, Karen finished packing for her trip. Jason offered to carry her bags to the car, an offer she gladly accepted. That would be such a big help, she said, giving him a kiss. He carried the bags to her car, placing them in the trunk. He couldn't help but notice how much she packed. It was certainly more than enough for a weekend. As he put her overnight bag in the trunk, he couldn't resist the urge to see what she had taken. So he opened the case. He spotted the container holding her birth control pills right off the bat. Only 10 were left in the container. What the hell? He asked himself. Why does she have birth control pills? Didn't she say she had her tubes tied? Or was that another lie? He glanced at the clothes she packed. Some seemed appropriate for a business meeting, but much of it appeared to be club wear, tiny dresses he had never seen before and frilly underwear. He also noticed a couple of very skimpy bikinis, one of which appeared to be a micro bikini, something he had only seen on the internet. What the hell kind of meeting is this? He asked himself. He pulled out his phone and took pictures. Opening her car door, he slipped the audio recorder under her seat and made sure it was turned on. Then he closed the car doors and made sure everything was locked up. That night, they spent time together, perhaps Jason thought, for the last time. His wife gave him her room number the next morning at breakfast and promised to call every night. I love you, she told him as she kissed him on the cheek. I love you too. He watched as she pulled out and drove off. When he got to work, he called Jerry and gave him her room number. Great, thanks. I'll get my guys on it right away. That afternoon, he got a call from Karen, letting him know she was at the airport and getting ready to take off. I'll call you when I get checked into my room, she said. I'd appreciate that. Remember, I love you. I love you too, baby. I'll miss you. Sure you will, he thought to himself sarcastically. I miss you too, he said instead as he ended the call. He looked up to see his father standing in the door. Everything okay, son? You look like your dog just died. I don't know, Dad. His father came into the office and closed the door. Everything okay at home? You want to talk about it? His father asked. Jason knew better than to try to keep anything from his father, so he told him everything he knew so far. That doesn't sound too good, son. I never would have suspected her of cheating on you. Me neither, Dad, Jason said. Well, listen, if there's anything your mom or I can do, let me know, the older man said. We're here for you. Thanks, Dad. I appreciate that. Jason took off a couple of hours early and drove to the airport, looking for Karen's car. He found it in the short-term parking and retrieved the audio recorder. Looking around, he noticed the rest of the car was neat as a pin, the way she always kept it. On the way home, he got a call from Karen. Hi, baby. Just wanted to let you know I got here okay. Thanks for letting me know, he said. I'm just getting settled in. I'll call you later tonight. Love you. Love you too, he said. After he got home, he turned on the audio recorder, hoping there would be nothing on it. For the most part, there wasn't anything except road noise and the sound of her radio. About halfway through the recording, however, he heard something that shattered his trust. He could hear her phone ringing, and since it was connected to her car through Bluetooth and worked through her speakers, he could hear both sides of the conversation. "Hey, baby," he heard a man's voice say. "Hey, yourself, stud muffin," she said. Stud muffin. Jason asked himself, who the hell is this clown? "I can't wait to see you again. Last week was fantastic." "I'm glad you approve," she said with a giggle. "Are we set for next week?" Next week? Jason thought, shocked. Got it all taken care of. "Did you tell your husband?" "Not yet." "Don't worry, sweetie. I've got it all under control. He doesn't suspect anything, does he?" "Not a thing. He's clueless as ever." "I hope you're right," he said. "I told you not to worry. He'll believe whatever I tell him." "Good," the man said. "Listen, I'm about ready to pull into the airport. I'll see you at the hotel tonight." "Okay. I can't wait. Bye, lover." "Bye-bye," she said, ending the call. Jason stared at the recorder, not believing what he had just heard. He played it again, just to make sure he wasn't taking anything out of context. Not only was she being unfaithful, but she had something planned for next week, the week of their 10th anniversary, and it didn't include him. "Dan," he thought to himself. "How long has this been going on? And who the hell is this guy?" He grabbed a beer from the refrigerator and sat at his desk, reflecting on the last few months. Had he really been so clueless that he missed all the signs? He started wondering what else she might be hiding. Up until now, he had always respected her privacy and stayed out of her personal things. But that was now off the table. He knew she kept her home desk locked, but he also knew where she kept the key. He went to their bedroom and opened a small drawer in her jewelry box. Sure enough, there was the key to her desk on a ring with a couple of other keys. He grabbed the ring and went into the bedroom they had set up as her office. He opened the desk and started looking through her files. Ordinarily, he would never have done this, but he felt that she no longer deserved any consideration after her betrayal of their marriage vows. What he found shocked him to the core. It seemed that Karen had been lying to him throughout their entire marriage. He pulled out a folder she used for her banking records and was stunned to see how much she had saved out of her pay. He knew how much she deposited in their joint account and was shocked to see that she had deposited much more than the agreed-upon 10% into her private account, which now had over $250,000. Looking through her purchases over the last few months, he saw that she had bought a very expensive men's Rolex watch along with other gifts, no doubt for her lover, since she had never given him anything that extravagant. She had also purchased a lot of expensive clothing online, including some revealing items from Victoria's Secret. Of course, he hadn't seen any of this, but there was more, much more. He also found medical bills for a family planning clinic. Apparently, she had been pregnant twice in the last 2 years and had gone in for an abortion both times. She had paid cash out of her own account. He wondered if one or both of the children she aborted were really his. He also saw that she had been paying for birth control pills for at least the last 4 years on a regular basis. Worse yet, he found a receipt for Plan B morning after pills. According to the date on the receipt, Karen had purchased them earlier this week. Among her receipts was a fairly recent one for a hefty down payment on a condo in a wealthy part of town. Was this to be her love nest? He wondered. Or was this part of her exit strategy from the marriage? There were also receipts for utilities and new furniture. He looked at the key ring he found earlier and wondered if one of them was a key to her condo. He intended to find out. He turned on her computer to see what he could glean from that. He knew she always wrote her passwords down and found a piece of paper taped to the bottom of her keyboard with a list of usernames and passwords written on it. He tried the first one, and sure enough, The computer came right up. Opening her browser, he found a link to an online email program and accessed it. The email client opened to her inbox, and he was shocked at what he found. There were several emails exchanged with someone named Greg Wilson, and most of them contained inappropriate comments about their encounters. He noted that the emails dated back almost an entire year, around the time he first noticed changes in her behavior. From what he could gather, their meetings initially occurred in hotel rooms, but later transitioned to her home. He spotted an email dated about 6 months ago that partially answered one of his questions. Greg had asked, "Did you take care of that little problem?" Karen responded affirmatively, explaining that she couldn't let him know she had been pregnant. Jason thought back 6 months and realized that was about the time he first caught her in a lie. As he kept scanning through the emails, he found a point where Greg suggested meeting in Karen's marital bed, but she firmly refused. "I will not do that to Jason," she replied. Greg countered with the idea of purchasing a condo with her earnings, suggesting it would allow them to meet without suspicion. That had been 3 months ago, and the receipt for the down payment was dated just over a month ago. Jason sat back, shocked by this revelation. The emails revealed that she was planning to use the condo as a place to meet up with Greg. He continued looking through the emails until one made him pause. Greg asked, "Why do you stay with your husband? Why not just leave him and move into the condo?" Karen replied, "Believe it or not, I still have feelings for him. He may be a straightforward accountant, but I like him, and he's good to me. I only got the condo for a place to meet without risking being seen at a hotel." Jason began printing her emails and copying the receipts he found when the phone rang. Karen's number flashed on the display. "Hello," he answered, keeping his voice steady. "It's me, babe. Are you all right? You sound out of sorts," she said. "I got a splitting headache," he replied, not wanting to let her know he was onto her. "I just wanted to let you know I'm settling down for the night. You should take something for that headache and get some rest. I love you and miss you," she said. "Yeah, me too. Goodbye." He ended the call. Wondering if she noticed he didn't specifically say he loved or missed her, he felt a surge of anger. The truth was he was close to punching a hole in the wall. He decided to find out who this Greg character was, so he began searching on the website for the company Karen worked for. Sure enough, he found Greg Wilson listed as the regional manager. He printed the page and added it to his stack of documents. Unable to rest, he verified the address of the condo and wondered if she had a security system set up. Looking through her paperwork, he found a series of numbers next to the word alarm. Of course she would write it down, he thought. She documented everything. Closing her computer, he headed out, stopping in the garage to grab a pair of latex gloves to avoid leaving any evidence. He found the complex easily and parked in her allotted spot. Walking to the door, he put on the gloves and tried one of the keys from the ring he found in her jewelry box. The door opened, and he stepped inside. He saw the alarm system console on the wall next to the door and entered the code he had found in her paperwork, ensuring the alarm was off. After turning on some lights, he looked around the condo and was impressed with Karen's choice of furnishings. She always had good taste, he thought, though it was unfortunate that she wasn't as loyal as she was stylish. There were no pictures that included him, but he hadn't really expected any. After all, this was her retreat, her escape from their marriage. Walking into the kitchen, he noticed a few dishes and some silverware, but there wasn't much in the refrigerator, and the pantry seemed just as bare. He was somewhat surprised to see the place fully furnished, complete with tasteful floral portraits and a large flat-screen television mounted on the wall. As he walked into the master bedroom, he noted it was also fully furnished, with long lace curtains hanging over the windows, just as she had done in their home. Looking down, he noticed they hung directly over an electric baseboard heater and shook his head, wondering if she had considered the potential safety risks. Opening the dresser drawers, he found some clothing he had never seen before, along with men's underwear he suspected belonged to Greg. He also discovered an assortment of personal items. Pulling out his phone, he took pictures of everything he found. In her nightstand drawer, he found a card addressed to Karen from Greg, thanking her for a watch and expressing excitement for her housewarming. The sight of it made him feel furious. He continued searching and found more clothes, both men's and women's, hanging inside the walk-in closet. In the master bathroom, he spotted 2 toothbrushes hanging over the sink and towels on the rack next to the shower. He pulled out his phone again and took more pictures. The second bedroom only contained a small desk and a chair, with a network cable suggesting she used it for her laptop. A few pieces of mail addressed to her lay on the table, all from utility companies. He took a picture of those, ensuring her name and address were clearly visible. The windows here, like in the master bedroom, were also covered with long lace curtains that fell right in front of an electric baseboard heater. Looking around, he noticed a few other things that could be considered safety hazards. For example, there were no smoke detectors in the bedrooms, and the one mounted in the kitchen ceiling looked very old. He wondered if it even had a battery in it. Making sure everything was as he found it, he turned off all the lights, reactivated the security system, and left, ensuring the door was locked behind him. He returned to his car and headed home, considering his options. Divorce was a clear choice in his mind. Even if she ended things with her lover, he could never trust her again. He knew that men often got the short end of the stick financially, but from her financial records, he saw she made considerably more than he did, which he hoped would be enough to avoid alimony. He decided to wait until he spoke with an attorney before taking any action, and hoped that her purchase of the condo in her name would mean he wouldn't have to give her the house or sell it and split the proceeds. In his mind, she had abandoned him when she bought the condo without telling him. They didn't have any children, so child support and custody weren't issues, but he wanted the 2 cheaters to pay for what they had done. Violence was out of the question, as he had no desire to go to jail. After getting home, he looked in the phone book and found a listing for Gregory Wilson. Hoping it was the right Greg Wilson, he dialed the number. "Wilson Residence," said a female voice. "Is this Mrs. Wilson?" he asked. "Yes, it is. To whom am I speaking?" "My name is Jason Chandler. Is your husband the regional manager for Acme Real Estate?" Jason inquired. "Yes, he is, but he's gone to a conference this weekend and will be out next week visiting other offices. You'll have to call the regional office and leave a message for him there." "Actually, Mrs. Wilson, you're the one I'd like to speak with," Jason said. "Oh," she responded. "Yes, ma'am. I hate to tell you this, but my wife is having an affair with your husband." "Are you sure about this?" she asked. "Yes, I am, and I can prove it." "You have ironclad proof of this?" she questioned. "I can even show you where they get together, if you want." He could hear her sigh over the phone. "Is tomorrow okay?" she asked. "Sure. What time works best for you?" "Make it about 1 o'clock in the afternoon," she suggested. He gave her the address and directions to Karen's condo. "I'll see you there then," Jason told her, ending the call. Smiling, he went to his desk and began making a list of things to do. The first thing he decided would be to change the locks on the doors. He could wrap that up in plenty of time to meet Greg's wife at Karen's condo. He considered getting drunk that night, but dismissed the idea. Instead, he grabbed a piece of cold pizza and munched on it as he weighed all his options. After finishing the pizza, he trudged up the stairs to bed. He got up early the next day and headed to a local hardware store, where he bought everything he needed to change the door locks. He also made another key to the condo. By noon, he had all of them changed, showered, and grabbed the audio recorder along with all the emails he had printed from Karen's account. He headed over to her condo to meet Greg's wife. He pulled into Karen's parking spot and spotted an attractive dark-haired woman in a Toyota Corolla not far away. He walked to the car and knocked on the window. She rolled it down and looked at him. "Are you Christy Wilson?" he asked. She nodded. "I am." "You must be Jason Chandler." "One and the same," he said, opening her door. "Come with me. I'll show you where they are spending time together. You may want to put these on first, though," he added, handing her a pair of latex gloves. "I don't want to leave any fingerprints." "Good idea," she said. They went to her door, and Jason used the key he had made to open it. He was glad to see it worked. After turning off the security alarm, they stepped inside. Jason showed her the bedroom, opening the drawers and closet so she could see Greg's clothing. "Oh my God! I've been looking for some of this stuff for the past couple of weeks. I was wondering where his clothes were disappearing to," she exclaimed. "Has your husband been wearing a Rolex watch lately?" Jason asked. She nodded. "Yes, he told me it was a gift from management." Jason shook his head and pulled the card out of Karen's nightstand. He opened it up and showed it to her. She read the note and began crying. "Is that his handwriting?" Jason asked. "Yes," she said, sobbing. "There's more," he said, pulling out the emails and the audio recorder. She read through the emails, tears flowing down her cheeks. Then he played the audio from Friday. "I'm sorry about all this," he said, wrapping his arms around her. He felt like crying as well, but held it in. "It's not your fault. I've suspected something like this for a while, but I never had any proof," she said. After a while, she collected herself and looked at him. "So what are you going to do?" she asked. "I'm going to divorce her. What about you?" "I'm kicking that lame dog out of the house as soon as I see him," she said. Suddenly, she stopped crying and looked at him. "I've got an idea," she said. "What?" he asked. "They want to live here together. Why don't we help them?" "What do you mean?" he inquired. "I mean, why don't we pack their things up and drop them off over here?" she responded. Jason thought for a moment and smiled at her. "I kind of like that idea, but we better get moving. They'll be back in a day or two." She shook her head. "Greg said he would be gone for a week after the conference. I bet anything she'll find an excuse to be gone as well." Jason suddenly remembered the recorded conversation. Karen specifically asked him if he had everything set for the next week, but didn't indicate what it was they had planned. "Damn, I think you're right. Still, I want to get her things out of my house as soon as possible." "I agree. Meet you back here in, say, 3 hours, she suggested. "Works for me. I'm just going to toss her stuff in trash bags. So I think I can do that, and be back here in 3 hours. "I'll see you then," she said, standing up. Jason took a hard look at her. She was shorter than Karen, with a girl-next-door charm that added to her shapely figure. He thought Greg was a fool to cheat on this woman. They left the condo and arrived about 3 hours later, their cars crammed with bags full of their respective spouses' belongings. They carried the bags into the condo and tossed them into the nearly empty second bedroom, not caring if anything broke. They knew the two would have to spend hours sorting through everything. "I don't know about you, but I wasn't exactly careful with his things," she said. He laughed. "Neither was I," Jason said, and they shared a high five. "I don't know about you, but I'm hungry," he added. "Me too. I could really go for a nice juicy hamburger. The big thick cheeseburger sounds really good to me as well. I know just the place. Care to join me?" "My treat." "Lead on," she said. He drove to the bar he and Ron liked to visit, and she followed. After they parked, Christy looked at the front of the building. "A bar?" she asked. "Trust me, they make the best burgers here. You'll love it." "Okay, I just hope you're not going to ply me with alcohol and take advantage of me," she said. He laughed. "As inviting as that sounds, I wouldn't do that to you." "Darn," she said, laughing. They went inside and ordered a beer and a burger with fries. As they ate, they swapped stories of their failing marriages. Her story was somewhat similar to his. She met Greg in college, and they married shortly thereafter, except she wanted children, and he didn't. He started working for Acme Real Estate, and she got a job doing accounts receivable for a home improvement company. "Are you a CPA?" he asked. She shook her head. No, I never went quite that far, but I was hoping to do so someday, she said. He told her about his background and job. We're always on the lookout for a good person. Maybe if you can get me a resume, we can help each other out. I just may do that, Mr. Chandler, she said, taking a bite of her burger. Just then, his phone buzzed. He saw the number was Karen's, so he answered. Hello, he said in a neutral tone. Hey baby, Karen said. He could tell she had been drinking. What are you up to? Oh, just down at the bar getting a burger. What's up with you? Guess what? I got the top seller award, she said, not waiting for his response. I'm happy for you, he replied. Yeah, and they want me to stay here in Vegas next week to work with their agents, she continued, clearly excited. He already knew that was a lie. Isn't that terrific? There's talk that I might get moved into management soon. No doubt because of someone else, he thought to himself. That's wonderful. What about our anniversary that's coming up this Wednesday? I know, and I'm sorry about that. Maybe we can celebrate it next weekend. Don't bother. I know your work is important to you, and I sure wouldn't want you missing a big sale. What's that supposed to mean? She asked. Nothing. It's just that you only get to celebrate 10 years of marriage once. But I understand how much your job means to you. Don't worry about it. Well, yes, my job is important to me, but I thought you might be happy for me, she said. I'm very happy. Go work with your agents. Don't worry about me, he replied. I love you, she said. Okay, me too. Bye. With that, he ended the call and looked at Christy. Well, there it is, he told her. She shook her head. She's actually choosing Greg over your anniversary, Christy said, placing her hand on his. He almost broke down crying. Here was someone he barely knew, more concerned about him than his own wife. What a... I'm sorry. Thanks, he said, trying to smile. He pulled out Jerry's card and called his private number. Jerry, he said when the older man answered. Jason Chandler here. I just heard from Karen, and she tells me she's going to be in Vegas for another week. I take it you don't believe her? Jerry asked. Not for a minute, Jason said. Well, I was just working on your report, but I can have my guys watch them and see what they do. We can go from there. I heard the conference wrapped up a couple of hours ago, and they're now in full party mode. Most everyone is going home tomorrow. By the way, your wife and her lover spent the night together last night. I've got some video I think you might be interested in. I'll email it to you if you want. It'll all be in my report. That would be great. Thanks, Jerry. He ended the call and looked at Christy. Well, we'll find out tomorrow what's really going on. The two lovebirds spent the night together. My guy is going to email me some video. Are you interested in looking at it with me? Not really, but I feel like I should. He nodded his head in understanding. Well, let's head over to my house then, he said, standing up. After Jason paid for the meal, they left the bar and headed for his house. By the time they got there and settled into his office, the video had arrived in his email. Want something to drink before we watch this? He asked. Sure. Coke, if you have it. One Coke coming right up, he said, going into the kitchen. He came back with 2 cold Cokes and handed one to her. He fired up the video, and they watched as Karen and Gray engaged in various activities, both Jason and Christy fighting back tears as they witnessed their spouses being unfaithful. Even more devastating was the pillow talk afterward. What do you think our spouses are doing right now? Karen asked. Well, if I know Christy, she's probably watching one of her boring movies or maybe reading one of her stupid books. Yeah, I know what you mean. I imagine Jason is probably working on another one of his spreadsheets or looking over the stock reports. Greg chuckled at that. You'd think he was saving the world or something. Christ, his father's company sells tires, for crying out loud. What's so important about that? So have you figured out what you're going to tell him after the awards banquet tomorrow? Greg asked. Yeah. I'll just tell him I've been asked to stay in Vegas for a week to shadow the reps here. He'll believe that. Hell, he'll believe anything I tell him. I could say the moon is made of green cheese, and he'd go along with it. By the time he figures it out, we'll be on the beach in Hawaii. I can't wait to see you in that new bikini you got." Christy went berserk. "Hawaii? That jerk is taking some time off to Hawaii. I'll rip his." She looked at Jason. "Sorry for calling your wife a..." "Don't be. I would have called her worse." They turned back to the video. "So what about your anniversary? Are you just going to blow it off? Hawaii sounds much more fun to me than a night at a steakhouse. I'll promise to make it up to him. Maybe I will, maybe I won't." Greg looked at her. "You know that he cares, right?" She shrugged. "It's only our 10th anniversary. There'll be more. Who cares about that? I need you and me right now." With that, they continued their conversation, prompting Jason to stop the video. "I've seen enough. How about you?" Christy nodded, tears running down her cheeks. "More than enough," she said. "I'll be making an appointment Monday to see an attorney about a divorce. You want to join me? Would you mind?" she asked quietly. "Not at all," he told her. Christy broke down sobbing. Jason held her in his arms and let her cry on his shoulder. He felt like crying as well, but decided to hold it in. He comforted her as much as he could while battling his own emotions. "Would you mind if I stay here with you tonight? No intimacy. I just want to be held." "Of course you can stay. Stay the week if you want." "Thanks. I can't believe I gave that jerk all those years. All that time I fell for his lies." "I know exactly what you mean." He led her upstairs to the master bedroom and found an old t-shirt that looked long enough for her to wear to bed. She took it and went into the bathroom to change. He changed into a pair of pajamas as he waited for her to return and climbed into bed. She came out of the bathroom in the long t-shirt, and he almost gasped when he saw her. He had always thought Karen's legs looked good, but Christie's were the shapeliest he had ever seen. She smiled as she climbed under the covers. "What's the matter? Haven't you ever seen a woman's legs before?" "None that look as good as yours," Jason said. "Flattery will get you everywhere." "Sir," she teased. He wrapped an arm around her and held her close, taking in her scent. She put an arm over his chest and snuggled close to him. "You know you're the only woman besides my wife I've ever been in bed with in over 10 years, he asked. "And you're the only man I've been with besides my husband," she said. They looked into each other's faces for what seemed like an eternity. Then Christy leaned over and gave Jason a gentle kiss on the lips. He responded, returning the kiss with more warmth than he knew was possible. He realized what could happen and backed off. He didn't want to repeat what Karen was doing to him. Apparently, Christy felt the same way and rested her head on his shoulder, not saying a word. They fell asleep that way and woke up the next morning spooning each other. "Good morning, sleepyhead. You don't need to move on my account," she added as he got up to use the bathroom. "Good morning, beautiful. I'll be right back." He went into the bathroom. By the time he came out, Christy had helped herself to the kitchen and was making them each a plate of bacon and eggs. Looking at the clock on the wall, he saw it was 8:30 a.m. He turned back to Christy. He loved watching her cook in his old t-shirt and was reminded for a moment of happier times when Karen made breakfast for them every morning. "Damn, that smells good," he said. "I hope you don't mind me helping myself to your kitchen," she said. "Not at all. I can't remember the last time someone made me breakfast." "Karen never cooked for you?" she asked. At first she did, but she quit making breakfast a long time ago. She said it took up too much time, and she had to make herself presentable for her clients. Jason muttered. "I agree," he said, taking in the smell of the bacon as she placed a large plate in front of him. He devoured his food like a man who hadn't eaten in a month. "Damn, that was good. You cook like this every morning?" "Whenever I can," she said. Jason's phone buzzed. Looking at the screen, he saw Jerry's name and number, so he answered. "Good morning, Jerry. Working on Sundays now." More often than I care to, Jerry laughed. I just wanted to let you know that your wife and her lover boarded their flight in Las Vegas just before 6 o'clock this morning. They had a 40-minute layover at LAX, and the plane took off from there about an hour ago. They'll be landing in Honolulu in about 5 hours or so. I have the flight information if you want it. I do, Jason said. They're on American Airlines Flight 31. I have someone in Honolulu ready to pick up their trail when they get there. Thanks, Jerry, Jason said, writing down the information. He ended the call and looked back at Christy. Well, it's on. They're on their way to Hawaii. Karen sat back in her seat after the plane took off, glancing out the window. She watched as the plane headed out over the Pacific Ocean. This is it, she thought to herself. Looking to her left, she saw Greg was already sound asleep in the seat next to hers. She closed her eyes for a moment and thought about the last 10 years. For a moment, she felt a pang of guilt at what she was doing to her husband, who foolishly trusted her. Deep down, she knew that this was just the latest in a series of bad decisions on her part. But she rationalized that she owed this to herself. Eventually, she thought, this would end with Jason none the wiser. Her marriage would go on, and they would ultimately retire and grow old together. Her first bad decision was telling Jason she couldn't get pregnant. The truth was she could, but she just didn't want to be tied down with babies. The idea of motherhood might appeal to some, but not to her. So she told Jason that a medical complication forced her to have her tubes tied. He bought her explanation and eventually accepted it. But she had problems with the IUD and was forced to quit using it. The pelvic pain and the headaches finally became too much for her to endure. So she decided to use standard birth control pills instead. She also started using the calendar rhythm method and avoided intimacy during her more fertile days. It worked most of the time. But she did end up pregnant twice. The first time was with her husband. Fearful of what his reaction would be to her pregnancy, which would reveal her first lie and her own desire to remain childless, she discreetly sought an abortion, paying for it with her own money. The second pregnancy occurred about 6 months ago with Greg. She confided in her lover about it and made the decision to terminate the pregnancy again, paying for it out of her own account. Hopefully, she thought, Jason would never find out about it. Then there were her affairs. She remained faithful to her husband for the first 7 years of their marriage, but that changed one day while she was out with a client who was both handsome and wealthy. It was a spur-of-the-moment decision, but one she never really regretted. They had an intense encounter in the master bedroom of a large house she was showing, and he expressed his appreciation by buying the house on the spot. She didn't do that very often, maybe about 10 times over the next year and a half, but she learned later that others had done the same thing. Sure, she felt a bit guilty, but she thought to herself that if the other women could do it and get away with it, so could she. In her mind, it didn't affect Jason at all. She never stopped loving him, and what he didn't know wouldn't hurt him. Then she met Greg, and things changed. He was everything her husband wasn't. Jason liked to analyze everything before making a decision, while Greg was spontaneous and made decisions on the fly. Jason's life and career had been decided long ago. He had worked for his father all his life and still did. Soon, he would become the CFO of his father's tire company and eventually take over as president and CEO. Greg, on the other hand, didn't know where he would be in 5 years and took things one day at a time. While Jason thought about the future, Greg lived for the moment. They were also quite different in their intimate moments. While Jason was attentive and focused on her comfort, Greg was more direct and assertive. At first, they met at motels and hotels around town or at houses they had listed for sale, but she became concerned that someone might spot them and alert either Jason or Greg's wife, Christy. Then there was the night Jason expressed concern that they were drifting apart. She got scared and decided to take a break from Greg, redirecting her attention to her husband. But that didn't last long. Greg wanted to reconnect, but she was afraid Jason might discover their secret. She needed a solution, so she decided to buy her own condo. This way, She would have a private space for herself and Greg, as he wanted to spend time with her away from her home. She didn't want to involve Jason in this, so they had long ago agreed to file separate tax returns. This arrangement allowed her to keep the condo hidden while benefiting financially. It seemed like a win-win, or at least that's what she told herself. All of that led to her latest decision to spend a week in Hawaii with Greg. She took a week off from her office, telling them she was going to Hawaii with Jason for the annual corporate gathering. Greg, meanwhile, told his wife he would be on the road for the next week, which was typical for him. She lied to Jason, telling him she would be in Vegas for the week. Of course, a simple phone call could reveal the truth, but she hoped Jason believed whatever she told him. The only downside was that she would miss spending their 10th anniversary together. However, she promised herself she would make it up to him once she returned, and all of this would remain her secret. She smiled as she looked down at the blue water below, thinking about Hawaii. She pulled out her phone and checked for messages or calls. That's when her world collapsed. She saw a message. "Your belongings have been moved to your love nest. Don't come home. Your soon-to-be ex-husband, Jason." Next, she saw an email with an attachment. She opened it and saw a video of her with Greg. There was a message in the email. "If you fight the divorce, I will send this video to everyone you know. I will ensure that everywhere you go, this video will be ahead of you. As for the lover boy, once he's back, he's looking at divorce and life on the street. I will make an example of him for betraying his wife." By now, blood had drained from Karen's face. "Oh my, I am done. What will I do now?" she thought. If Jason was that angry, he would follow through. Suddenly, she felt the plane shudder and thought they had hit turbulence. She felt the plane nose down, and the engine sounded different. She realized something was dreadfully wrong when she looked out the window. Suddenly, there was a flurry of activity in the cabin, and she could feel the G-forces pushing her into her seat. Looking outside, she could tell they were going down fast. "Oh my God," she thought to herself. "This is it. We're going to crash. I'm going to die." Oxygen masks suddenly fell down, and she could hear other passengers, including Greg, screaming as the flight attendants tried to prepare them for the inevitable. She looked at her phone, tears smearing her face, and made one last decision. Jason and Christy had finished breakfast and put the last of the dishes away. They sat back down at the table and discussed plans for dealing with their wayward spouses. Jason was impressed with Christy's ability to analyze a problem. Right now, he felt closer to her than he had to Karen for months. He had just returned to the table with a second cup of coffee for them when his phone buzzed. He saw Karen's name and number show up, so he put it on speaker. "Hello," he asked. "Jason," he heard Karen cry out. It was hard to hear as there was a lot of background noise, and they heard other people screaming. "Yes, Karen, what's going on?" he asked, concern creeping in. "I'm sorry. Forgive me," they heard before the call suddenly ended. Jason and Christy looked at each other, shocked. He tried calling Karen back, but it went straight to voicemail. He looked at Christy. "Try calling Greg," he told her. She ran into the front room and grabbed her phone from her purse. As he watched, she tried calling but shook her head. "It went straight to voicemail," she said. "He must be busy." He went into his home office and fired up his computer. After it came up, he did a search and found a contact number for the airline. He called and got the runaround, but was finally able to talk to someone who confirmed they were investigating reports that the plane had gone down. He left his name and number along with Karen's and Greg's information, and was told someone would contact him. He also left Christy's information so they could reach out to her. He did a quick Google search, but nothing showed up. He figured it would take at least an hour before any news surfaced. They went into the front room and turned on the television, wondering if anything had been reported. Jason flipped through the channels but found nothing. Finally, one of the news networks reported that an American Airlines flight to Honolulu had crashed in the Pacific, but there were no details. "Oh God," Christy said, covering her mouth. Jason held her and silently prayed that Karen was still alive. He hated what she had done to their marriage, but he didn't want her dead. An hour later, his phone rang. He turned down the television and answered. "Mr. Chandler?" A woman asked. "This is he said. "I just wanted to reach out and confirm that your wife's flight has crashed," she said. "I don't have any more information for you at this time, but we'll contact you just as soon as we have more details." "Thank you," Jason said, ending the call. He and Christy shared a hug and shed a few tears. A few minutes later, Christy's phone rang, and she was given the same information. Sometime later, his father called. This was not unusual, as his parents often reached out to him whenever they heard something like this on the news. "Hey, Jace," his father said. "Hey, Dad, how's it going?" he asked. "Just got back from church. Did you see the news about that crash?" his father asked. "Yeah, I did," Jason said. "That's terrible," his father continued. "By the way, how's Karen? Isn't she on her way back from Vegas?" "She's not doing too well right now, Dad. She was on that airplane that crashed." "What?" his father asked, shocked. "What was she doing going to Hawaii without you?" "She was with her boyfriend," Jason said. "Oh my God," the elder man said. "I'm so sorry to hear that, son. Listen, take the week off and take care of things. I'll let Mike know. If there's anything we can do, just call, okay?" "Thanks, Dad," Jason said, ending the call. His mind flooded with conflicting emotions. On one hand, he was sad that Karen was, in all likelihood, dead. On the other, he was angry with her for cheating. He was also angry at himself for not confronting her sooner. Strangely enough, he wasn't upset about the fact that her death would mean no divorce. Then he had another thought. He would have to deal with all her final expenses, including the condo. Crap, he thought to himself. He looked at Christy and wondered how she would manage all this. What would she do? He asked himself. He had a thought and approached her. "Christy, why don't you sell your place and move in here with me?" She looked up at him, tears filling her eyes. "Do you mean that?" she asked. "Yes, I do. I have another bedroom upstairs, and you're going to have a lot to deal with over the next few months. Maybe we could help each other get through this." She thought for a minute before answering. "Why not? But only on one condition." "What's that?" he asked. "You let me sleep in your room," she said. "Seriously?" Jason asked, surprised. This was moving much faster than he thought it would, and he wondered if it was wise. He set that thought aside and decided to throw caution to the wind. "Yes, I haven't really had the comfort of a partner for a long time. Last night, I felt content for the first time in ages. Is that okay with you?" "It's more than okay," he said. "Good. Then I'll run back to the house to get my things, and I'll be back over tonight," Christy said. Jason nodded. "I'll be here," he replied. After she left, he called Lucy, the woman who ran the office Karen normally worked out of. "Hello," she said when she answered. "Lucy, this is Jason Chandler," he said. "Oh, hi, Jason. How's Hawaii?" "I don't know. I hear it's nice this time of year." "Why?" "Well, Karen said the two of you were going there after the company meeting. I assumed you were on your way." "No, she was on her way to Hawaii, but not with me. She left with Greg." "What?" Lucy asked, shocked. "That's right, but she didn't make it. Neither did he. The plane they were on crashed into the Pacific Ocean earlier today." "Oh no. Do you know if she made it?" "I don't think either of them survived the crash," he said. "I'm so sorry. Please accept my condolences, and thanks for letting me know. I'm not sure if you're aware of it, but the company has life insurance for all their employees. I'll get the paperwork started first thing in the morning, but I will need something from the airline. Can you get that to me?" "Yeah, I'll get what I can. I do have a question for you, though." "What's that?" Lucy asked. "Were you aware that Karen was having an affair with Greg?" he asked. "I suspected there was something going on. There were rumors, but nothing more. We usually don't gossip about things like that in the office." "I see. Well, that's all I have. I'll be in touch." "Thanks. And again, please accept my condolences. I appreciate that," Jason said, ending the call. That night, as he and Christy watched television, a report came on about the crash. According to the report, the plane's final moments were captured by a crewman aboard a freighter that was just a couple of miles from the crash site. The network aired the amateur video, which clearly showed the airplane rapidly falling nose first. It looked like the craft literally pancaked as it hit the water. The report said the freighter changed course to see if they could recover any survivors. They pulled a number of bodies out of the water, but there were no survivors. They also recovered a lot of luggage, including Karen's and Greg's. Neither of their bodies were found. The next few months were hectic for both Jason and Christy. She moved in with Jason and sold her house. Jason had plenty to deal with, including Karen's condo. There was nothing in it he wanted, so he gave everything away to Goodwill, which was more than happy to take it. He finally sold the condo, getting back what Karen had originally paid for it. Both he and Christy received an insurance check for $500,000 from Acme Real Estate for the deaths of their respective spouses. Christy moved in with Jason, and they immediately began exorcising all traces of Karen. Pictures came down, knickknacks were removed, and furniture, especially the bed, was replaced. Jason let family members take what they wanted. The rest, including the 2 cars, was either sold, donated to Goodwill, or tossed in the dump. Jason also had to jump through hoops to resolve Karen's bank accounts. After a couple of months and a mountain of paperwork, he walked away with a check for around $250,000. Lawyers pounced on both Jason and Christy, looking to capitalize on the crash. Further investigation revealed that the crew misunderstood warnings from the onboard computer and took the wrong actions. The craft fell at an estimated 12,000 feet per minute and hit the water at somewhere around 135 miles per hour, meaning that it took just over 3 minutes for the plane to crash into the ocean. Karen's last 3 minutes, some of which were spent on the phone with him, must have been hell, he thought. Her last act had been one of contrition, no doubt brought on by the realization that she was plummeting to her death, and there was nothing anyone could do about it. Nevertheless, he thought it was too little and far too late. Fortunately, the airline settled with all the affected families, paying a little over $175,000 for each passenger. Between Jason and Christy, they grossed a bit more than $1.6 million after everything had been accounted for. Of course, the taxman got his share, but they still ended up with a very tidy nest egg. Since neither Karen's nor Greg's remains were found, there was no need for a funeral, but Jason and Christy held memorial services, mostly for the benefit of their respective families. Neither one shed a tear for their deceased spouses. They discussed that Jason would not piss on their symbolic graves. But a few weeks later, Jason visited the cemetery. "I just came to tell you that I am very happy that you are dead. The divorce would have cost me money. But since your death, I am getting money. Thanks for dying." Jason began walking away but then turned back, feeling a sense of closure. "I will regret not confronting you and watching your face turn white, but letting go in this way is a much better feeling." 3 months after the services, Christy left her job and went to work for Jason. By now, they were madly in love with each other. One night, as they ate dinner at the local Texas Roadhouse, Jason got down on one knee and proposed. Christy squealed with delight as the people around them applauded. "It's about time you decided to make an honest woman out of me," she whispered in his ear. "Why is that?" he asked. "Because you're going to be a daddy," she said. He covered her face with kisses. "I love you so much," he told her. "I love you more. Just one favor, though." "What's that?" he asked. "Please don't ask me to fly anywhere," she said. He laughed as he hugged her close. "No worries, my dear. If you ever fly, I'll be your wings." Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, Please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.